The most difficult aspect of grief is not the memories retained, but rather the possibilities. I always think of my grandfather as I also think of my close family friend whom I will often identify, if not spoken, I often identify this individual as a brother. When I think of them, I think of the time that we could have had, because around the time of their death, I was so busy. I was so focused on something. And oftentimes it had to do with occupational success. My grandfather passed away. That's when I was doing dental assisting. I did not care about dental assisting. I simply did it for stability. I simply did it for capitalism. Like, I didn't care. I don't care about dentistry even to this day, but I have a great appreciation and respect for the practitioners within that field, within that practice, but I don't care for it. I honestly hate it. But around that time, that's what I was doing. I was on externship and my grandfather passed away. So I didn't spend enough time with him. And I always think of the song by Willie Nelson, or the rendition by Willie Nelson, which is always on my mind. Maybe I didn't hold you quite as tight as I should have. Maybe I didn't kiss you as much as I should have. And I know these are not the lyrics verbatim, but this is my revision. Maybe I didn't do enough. And that's the same thing I think when I refer to my close family friend. I lost that individual February 28th, 2018. That was my senior year. I was so focused on just making a smooth transition into adulthood that I didn't even pay attention to the people in my life at that time. In 2020, I was more aware of the people in my life due to that initial experience from 2018. So I didn't get too consumed with dental assisting as I did with graduating from high school, but I didn't pay attention to the extent of my family. Getting more over to my point of discussion, grief. Grief is the hardest when you assess possibilities, at least in my experience, at least from, where I stand with my experience of death. Grief is the hardest part. I've experienced a traumatic death, 2018 when my younger brother influence passed away. It was due to self-affliction. When my grandfather passed away, 2020, it was natural causes, but it was very unexpected. So getting to the point, I wanted to have this discussion of perseverance after death. After grieving or while grieving, it's perseverance that needs to be assessed, because in a figurative tense, if an L is not to be taken as a loss, yet rather a lesson, why should I perceive a transcendency as such? A loss is never a loss. It's a lesson. It's always spoken in a figurative tense, so literally, why is it hard for me to perceive it as such? When in fact it is, Time is a continuum. So when one dies in third person, in first person, they transition to the next phase of their life. It's not a death as it is a rebirth, or rather, death is, in fact, a rebirthing. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, so the dead still live. The dead is still alive. Energy does not absolve itself. It just goes somewhere else, to a next available space or vessel or area or wherever it is to exist. So why stagnate myself in adversity when perseverance is almost inevitable? Why suspend myself in this construct of time when prophecy is being fulfilled? Why suspend myself in this construct? Not even just relating to time. Why suspend myself in a construct when a prophecy is being fulfilled? Like, we know in giving life and existing in this life, we know that it's to soon transition. I'm not going to say it's to soon end, but it's to transition. Like, we know we are going to die. We know that we are going to experience this rebirth. That's why we often discuss heaven or nirvana or the purest form of ecstasy within religion or, spirituality, what have you, ancestors, like, we know this is to occur. So the prophecy is being fulfilled when we transition. So we never go anywhere. It's never to be perceived as a loss. Yet it often is. And, I definitely understand that as, again, someone that has experienced that. But moreover, and this is probably going to be the part of the discussion where people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I'm going to say it anyways. We are God. In this form, we are not of and or at complete divinity, yet we are God. God took of himself and or of itself to create creation. So we are merely scattered pieces of God's consciousness. We are contained energy, and our body is the physical representation of that which is being contained. So our body is merely a machine or an avatar we operate. Yet without the source of life, without energy, without this light, without this breath, the body is nothing more than a structure. I can't functionally use a remote without batteries. Without batteries, the remote is just a hunk of plastic. So without my body, I still remain because I'm the source, I'm the battery. Whatever I connect to, I give life. I give my body life just as much as my body gives me life. The food I consume and digest and the nutrients that I receive further aids the health of my life. So again, I give my body life just as much as my body gives me life. Regardless, energy remains. The breath of life is just now without a form. So as we exist in the physical, we are attempting to loosen the restraints. Through knowledge and understanding, intention and execution, we are attempting to become light, to be less dense in weight, to radiate in visibility, to transcend and ascend. We must become light. And inevitably that's what we become if the theory of, stars are absolute, we become light. So there will come a time when our physical form will no longer serve us. There will come a time when consciousness will return to the source to enlighten the masses of consciousness. When the peace of my grandfather returned, September 29th, 2020, when the peace of my brother's friend returned, February 28th, 2018, consciousness shifted. The way I viewed my reality, the way that I view my life has changed every time I've experienced death. And I'm not saying that you have to experience physical transitioning in order to grasp any sort of reality, but anytime I've experienced the loss, my perception of life changed completely. I experienced a death, talking about it just enough, like I experienced a death. I could recognize a death of identity. My consciousness decompressed and expanded with new perspective. I experienced a first and third person death dually because I'm alive in the flesh, yet the spirit is constantly renewed. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying, the shift of consciousness when a piece of my grandfather, a piece of my close family friend, a piece of, consciousness returned to the source of consciousness. It just enlightened the masses of consciousness. And that's kind of what grieving is. You're experiencing not only a physical transitioning, but you're also experiencing an internal transitioning of the spirit is readjusting and or realigning in consciousness. Like the way that I used to think before 2018 is not the way that I think in 2021. The way that I used to think in 2020 is not the way that I think in 2021. The way that I used to think, yeah, I mean, the way I used to think, the way that I used to be is not who I am. I literally died. Like that version of myself died. She no longer exists. I can identify her, but that's no longer me. So I say all to say, like, death is just in life. And as death is in life, when you experience a physical transition, it's of life, like it is really a rebirthing of life. It's hard to say in the midst of loss. And I'm not going to act like I'm going to be saying this when other people in my life pass on, but this is a milestone of remembrance, something to remember, something to go back to whenever people pass away, whenever people transcend. They're not dead. They've just taken on a new form, which might just be formless, So yeah, all in all, we are merely resources of the source. As we are of the source, we too are of each other. We are one. Like nothing as inseparable as it seems. You know what I mean? Like, we are one. No matter what we say, we are one. Okay? Deep down in our hearts, we are one. And that's the way it is. Oh, oh, oh. When you experience death, sometimes you feel like, or even if you experience adversity, you feel like you can't get through it, but it's not because you don't think you can, it's because you don't want to, you know? It's the will to persevere. It's the testing of your strength to persevere in the face of adversity, because inevitably, it's inevitable. Even when you stagnate yourself, the world around you proves that perseverance, or the continuum of time, is like constant. When people passed away, like, everybody kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. That was one thing that I felt to be so crazy about my experience. Like, when I was in dental assisting, there was no day allotted for grievances, like none at all. So I literally had to keep working, or else I had to make up days. And I'm like, I'm not making up no days, but it was tough, you know, but I had to persevere, you know. 2018, everybody was like, okay, well, we still graduating, so girl, whatever, like, you know. So, yeah. Hopefully, this was something of value for you. Because I really wanted to come on my channel and just speak. And every now and again, I always talk about death and the transitioning of a life. But hopefully, it's not as scary as it sounds. Because, you know, it's just a rebirthing, it's a transitioning.